make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn, with live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe for this Wednesday, January the 8th in London. Coming up this hour.
Iranian missiles strike 2 U.S. bases in Iraq. Iran's foreign minister says it's proportionate retaliation and it's concluded. President Trump says all is well as the damage is assessed.
Oil comes off its highs and Asian markets pare losses after the attacks as Iran and the U.S. appear to calm tensions.
Carlos Ghosn is promising to name the people he said engineered a coup to destroy him. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to tell the EU again the UK wants a quick trade deal. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And also in Iran, a Boeing 737 jet crashes shortly after takeoff due to what state media describe as technical issues. Reports suggest all on board were killed.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app. A very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chahij. Good morning, everyone. It's coming up to 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Roger, we wake up to geopolitical risk again, although some of the moves have faded since the missile attacks from Iran. It's said that this is not war. So next, of course, the critical thing will be the response from the US. But before we look to that, I wonder, should we believe that this was an attack from Iran that was proportionate and not a means of escalation?
Well, those words exactly were what Javad Zarif, the Iranian foreign minister, tweeted quite early on. In fact, Donald Trump, everyone was waiting for the tweet that would perhaps lead us in another direction. But no, his opening words, all is well, which I think threw people quite a lot. A suggestion that this may be perhaps an arrangement whereby the Iranians respond as they have to, and in a save face, but at the same time, we suspect at the moment no casualties in that attack. That's what we're hearing. It's not confirmed. That may mean the US doesn't have to respond, in which case things calm down. Certainly the markets seem to be taking that view.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did get some volatility added into the mix when we heard about the Boeing crash. And then, of course, we heard that it was actually a technical fault. And again, things calmed down again. We're still waiting for the exact...
We don't know on that. I mean, it's obviously a fairly new story. It's the 737-800, not the 737 MAX. Let's emphasize that. But obviously an issue for Boeing as well in all this. So clearly these are issues that are rather key, and the market's responding accordingly, not least the oil price.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why don't we start with oil then? What we did see was Brent actually moving towards $72 a barrel in the Asian session, but really it's come off the highs. We trade at 69.03 right now, up more than 1%. WTI 63.25, up 0.9%. And along with oil spiking, we saw gold do the same. It really seems to be the safe haven of choice with the Middle East geopolitical risk. 0.9% higher on gold. We actually went above $1,600 an ounce for the first time since 2013. Right now we trade at 1,587. Onto the equity market, as we are 3 minutes into the equity market open in Europe now, and we are seeing declines on the Stock 600, a drop of 0.5%. This after we ended in the green yesterday. So we're not seeing a huge move to the downside here. Taking a look across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 lower by 0.5%. The CAC 40 is down by the same. The DAX leading some losses, down 0.7%, along with the FTSE MIB. The IBEX lower by 0.5%. 0.2%. We did see S&P 500 E-minis in the Asian session at one point drop as much as 1.7%. But really, we've paired those losses. So now we're down just 0.1% on S&P futures. NASDAQ futures down 0.2%. Dow futures down almost 0.4%. Though that might have a little bit to do with the expectation of the move in Boeing. Of course, the Dow much more industrial heavy. Taking a look at the 10-year Treasury yield. Here, we've seen that yield break below the trend line it's been in since about September. And we actually saw it drop 11 basis points towards a 170 handle. Again, that move has really moderated. We're down 3 basis points now. 179 is where we trade on the 10-year yield. And yield's absolutely steady in both the core and the periphery in Europe. The 10-year bund yield at negative 25. In the FX space, I mean, what struck me through a lot of this Middle East risk is actually the yen hasn't moved a whole lot. Dollar yen unchanged right now, 108.45. I've covered commodities, so that takes us cross asset, Roger. But as we say, we did see some big moves and they've all stabilized somewhat. But there is still a little bit of a risk-off tone across these markets.
I think a lot of things still need to be clarified before the markets can be reasonably happy about the future. Anyway, let's take a look what the stocks are to watch this morning. Bloomberg's Kit Rees has joined us in our London studio. So, Kit, good morning to you. Now, chip stocks, Samsung had some reason to be happy, didn't they?
Yeah, so there's some more good news for the subsector. This comes after USPO Microchip also gave a well-received update. So Samsung said that its quarterly profit came in ahead of expectations, and this shows that prices of memory chips are beginning to recover from a recent downturn. So this might bode well for the European suppliers, but I guess the Middle East tensions are kind of taking center stage this morning. So if we have a look, ST Microelectronics, one of the suppliers to Samsung, is down 1.6%. So is Infineon, and ASML is also down a touch. So again, it's all about the Middle East this morning.
Indeed. And meanwhile, miners, Anglo-American bidding for Sirius, got some news on the talks.
Yeah, so Anglo-American shares are down 1.9%. They're the worst performers among the mining stocks this morning. So the company said, yes, it's in talks to buy Sirius Minerals with a possible offer for 5.5 pence per Sirius share. And Anglo said that its offer values Sirius at around $507 million. It's interesting because Sirius Minerals is building a potash mine, but it's had some difficulties with the project. So the company suspended a bond sale last year, which threw into doubt its plan to build the mine. So perhaps some good news for Sirius there. I don't think the shares are trading in Sirius. Oh, they are actually. Yes, wow. 39% higher there. So yes, good news.
They're clearly happy. Right. So finally, Greggs. They expect their financial performance to be slightly higher than expected.
Yes, so it looks like Greggs is on a roll. If I say
not
that.
a vegan sausage roll, possibly?
Yeah, I mean, that came out last year, and I guess it's proving to be quite popular. So the company said that it now expects its adjusted pre-tax earnings to be slightly higher than previous expectations. And the shares, yes, they're up 0.5% there, so well received. I mean, the stock rose 64% last year. It's been a market darling. So I guess, yeah, it said that it had a strong finish to the year, so good news there.
Yeah, and I know popular in some parts of this very room we're sitting in at the moment. So I won't go further than that on the basis it might be libelous. But thanks very much indeed, Kit Rees there with Stocks to Watch.
I'll refrain from commenting on that, Roger. As we move towards our top stories now, Iran struck back at the United States early Wednesday for killing its top general, Qasem Soleimani. The Revolutionary Guard fired a series of missiles at 2 military bases in Iraq housing American troops. A U.S. official said there were no immediate reports of American casualties.
The strikes, which came as Iran buried Soleimani, raised fears that the two longtime foes were now closer to war, but there were also some indications that tensions could ease, at least in the short term. Iran's foreign minister tweeted that Tehran had taken and concluded proportionate measures in self-defense. He added that Tehran did not seek escalation or war, but would defend itself against further aggression. And President Donald Trump tweeted shortly after the missile attacks, "All is well," adding, "So far, so good," regarding casualties. He also announced he'd be making a statement later today.
Speaking to Bloomberg, former U.S. State Department Undersecretary Bob Hormat said it was a positive thing the president did not appear on TV immediately following the attack.
And it means there is an opportunity for reflection, for communication, and probably when he speaks, the odds are it will be de-escalation, maybe tough talk about what the U.S. would do or could do to Iran, but not a tough set of actions to back that talk up at this point.
That was former U.S. State Department Undersecretary Bob Hormats.
Well, let's stay in the region. A Boeing 737 jet crashed in Iran shortly after takeoff this morning. Local media reported that all passengers and crew are dead. Boeing says it's aware of media reports out of Iran, is gathering more information. The plane maker's already mired in crisis, of course, following crashes in the last 18 months that killed nearly 350 people. We should add the 737 involved in this crash, 737-800, not, of course, the 737 MAX, which has been at the centre of all the problems for them.
And meanwhile, and separately, Boeing has also announced it's recommending airline pilots put pilots through simulator training before they fly the 737 MAX. It's a stunning reversal intended to reassure the flying public of the grounded jetliner's safety. The plane maker notified the FAA of the shift, and the US regulator will make a final decision. One of the key selling points of the MAX had been that pilots of the earlier version would only need computer-based instruction.
Samsung reported profit-beating estimates, as we said, as memory chip prices began to climb out of a rut. Bloomberg's Peter Pay has the details from Seoul.
The world's largest memory chip maker reported a 30% fall in fourth quarter operating income, but still beat expectations, driving shares to spike nearly 3% in midday trading in Seoul. Global chip prices, the biggest determinant of Samsung's bottom line, showed signs of recovery as easing of trade tensions between the U.S. and China bolstered orders from data center operators. In Seoul, Peter Pay, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, the dollar will weaken this year, according to billionaire money manager Jeffrey Gundlach. The Double Line CEO says economic data is flashing yellow for recession. He says the growing U.S. deficit, steepening yield curve and pullback in foreign investment may finally hit the greenback. He also had general comments in terms of returns for stocks and bonds, which he thinks won't be as good as for 2019. Roger, you could call that a consensus call. He says it won't be roaring 20s and it won't be boring 20s. He sees volatility increasing as well.
Okay, let's get the latest now in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. Let's start with one of our top stories. The next act of the Carlos Ghosn drama begins today. The former Nissan chief is holding a news conference in Beirut to tell his side of the story. Bloomberg's Dana Kreisch has a preview.
Ghosn will most likely talk about Japan's legal system, which he has described as rigged, and reasons behind his escape. Some expect him to discuss Nissan's allegations against him. But will he name names or give details about his Hollywood movie-style trip to Lebanon? That remains to be seen. Beirut, Dana Kreisch, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The UK wants a free trade deal with the EU by the end of the year. That's what Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to tell European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen today. But late last year, the EU chief expressed skepticism it was possible to reach a deal in such a tight schedule. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to arrive in Istanbul on a visit officially dedicated to the inauguration of the Turk Stream gas pipeline between Russia and Turkey. However, as Bloomberg's Simon Demakan explains, talks could now circulate around escalating tensions in the Middle East.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin will most likely focus on geopolitical tensions as they get set to meet in Istanbul. The fallout from the US-Iran conflict could top the agenda, as both leaders no doubt will want to diffuse tensions in the region. In Istanbul, Simon Demakan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And smoke from deadly bushfires that have devastated Australia has now spread halfway across the world, darkening skies in Argentina and beyond. Bloomberg's Jason Scott has all those details.
Sydney and Canberra on Wednesday faced another day of toxic haze shrouding the skyline. A US weather satellite captured the smoke crossing South America and drifting into the Atlantic Ocean, more than 7,000 miles east of Sydney. With more than 100 fires still burning, authorities are warning that dangerously hot conditions will return to the nation's southeast on Friday. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 100 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now with the morning sport, here's Joe Rawson.
Manchester City took a big step towards retaining the League Cup with a 3-1 win over rivals Manchester United in the first leg of their semi-final. First half goals from Bernardo Silva, Riyad Mahrez and Andreas Pereira, who put the ball into his own net, have given Pep Guardiola's side the advantage. Marcus Rashford's late strike has given Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side hope of turning the tie around. Cricket and captain Joe Root believes England are lucky to have Ben Stokes after the all-rounder inspired them to a 189-run victory over South Africa in the second test. He hit 72 runs from 47 balls, took 6 catches and bowled the last 3 wickets in the win that levelled the 4-match series in Cape Town. And Great Britain will have to get past Australia if they are to retain hopes of winning the first ever ATP Cup. Tim Hemming's GB tennis team take on the hosts in the quarterfinal tomorrow. They top their group after winning their last match with Moldova 3-0 in Sydney.
And that was Joe Rawson with all the latest sport. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's markets. IBKR offers commissions starting at $0 for U.S.-listed stocks and ETFs, enhanced price execution via IB Smart Routing, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, our clients enjoy the lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR integrated investment account at IBKR.com.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Tracy Alloway.
Let's bring in Sean Darby, global equity strategist over at Jefferies. How should markets be judging and assessing and pricing geopolitical risk at this particular moment in time?
Well, the strange thing is, at the very end of last year, we had sort of the perfect storm of hard Brexit, trade dispute, all actually dissolving. Actually, the rate of change of those risks actually moved down quite considerably. And in fact, in the background, one of the other bigger risks was the US repo market, which actually didn't phase the markets at all. So 3 big end-of-year risks actually dissolved very nicely for investors coming into the new year. Of course, the geopolitical risks around Iran, of course, have been very difficult to sort of forecast. But I think the way to look at it is that the oil curve has actually shifted upwards and not necessarily gone into a backwardation. I think that will be much more difficult for risk assets and equity markets, because it would actually highlight the fact that there's going to be an ongoing supply shock for markets. So at the moment, the fact that we've moved the oil curve upwards has probably been relatively sanguine, and equally the dollar has actually dropped over the last month and a half, which has backstopped, I think, risk assets.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. Been quite a volatile day for equity markets in Asia, with whiplash price action prevailing across the various indices. Initial sharp losses were paired, with the Nikkei closing down 1.6%, the Kospi down 1.1%, the Hang Seng down 0.8%, and the Shanghai Composite lower by 1.2%. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are both well off their worst intraday levels, but are still lower on the day, though, currently trading 1 and 0.2% lower, respectively. European equities have opened lower across the board, with the Euro Stoxx 50, the DAX, the CAC 40 and FTSE 100 all trading lower by 0.5 to 0.75%, with the FTSE outperforming and the DAX lagging. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is trading 3 basis points lower at 1.79%, after trading as low as 1.7% earlier in the Asia session. The 10-year German bond yield is 1 basis point lower at minus 0.26%, while in the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is lower by 0.1%. Look at the European event risk calendar today. German factory orders for November came in weaker than expected, with French consumer confidence also a miss. Looking ahead, the highlights later today include Eurozone confidence readings, UK labour cost data, and Swedish retail sales. We'll also get Riksbank minutes from last month's rate meeting, in addition to the Bank of England's Haldane and the ECB's Guindos speaking today. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Roger?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. Dramatic scenes in Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido stormed the National Assembly building. He pushed past armed guards 2 days after President Nicolas Maduro's loyalists blocked him from attending his own re-election. The incident occurred as his rival for the position of parliamentary speaker held a session inside. Lawmakers then voted to recognise Guaido as speaker. A teenager spared jail after being found guilty of lying about a rape in Cyprus has now arrived back in the UK. The 19-year-old touched down at Heathrow Airport and left via a private exit. She said she was attacked by a group of Israeli tourists in Ayia Napa, but police then made her withdraw all her allegations. And finally, 10 years ago, the biggest story in the world, but now the saga is coming to an end. The International Monetary Fund is ready to leave Greece for good, closing its Athens office. Last year, Greece repaid some of the money it owed to the IMF ahead of schedule. It plans to repay even more this year to prove the crisis is now really over for good. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you. Wow, what a milestone, Roger, in Greece's equity market, one of the best performing last year.
Extraordinary, really, when you consider what it was all like before the crisis. Grexit, don't forget, even before Brexit, that takes us back a bit.
Yeah, it certainly does. Let's get back to our top story, and Iran has fired missiles at 2 Iraqi air bases housing US troops in response to the killing of General Qasem Soleimani. The US president has been briefed on reports of the attacks and is monitoring the situation closely with his national security team. He tweeted, quote, "All is well" after the attacks. For more, let's go live to Dubai, where Bloomberg's Middle East reporter Zainab Fatah is standing by. Zainab, great to have you with us. I suppose what we're trying to work out is what message Iran is trying to send with this attack. Is it sending the message that it's proportionate and the escalation ends here, or should we actually see this as a big escalation of the conflict?
Iran is trying to do two things. One thing, it vowed revenge, and it has to show the millions of Iranians that Iran is not afraid, and it needs to do, and it will take revenge for the most senior military commander in the country. At the same time, it does not want to end up with an open war and an escalation. So this target, it was a very conventional way to respond, and in a way, it kind of provided an off-ramp for President Trump and allows for de-escalation in the region, because as far as we know, and so far, the senior Iraqi officials are saying that basically there are no casualties. So Zarif just now been speaking, and he said that Iran wanted to be proportionate in its response, and its action was in self-defense. He said, we sent a message to Americans immediately after the attack, so that's definitely, it's aimed at the Iranian public and aimed domestically. At the other hand, he put out a tweet where he was saying that we do not seek escalation or war. So maybe that's because Iran is facing a lot of issues economically. It's against the ropes across the region in Iraq and in Lebanon. So this is not the best time for it to escalate.
Zainab, I suppose that some people might say, is this really going to satisfy opinion in Iran? The Supreme Leader Khamenei called it a slap against the US. He also talked of a crushing response. But if in the end they fired some rockets, some missiles at 2 US bases, no one was killed, some of the missiles didn't even get there, will the Iranian people feel this is enough for what they are clearly angry about?
Well, the Iranian people are angry, but the Iranian people have also other issues aside from this. There are hardliners who will always want to see more escalation, and some of those hardliners we may actually see the government of Iran resort to its proxies to carry out attacks across the region, where the government of Iran can later deny responsibility for through Hezbollah, through the other proxies in Iraq. But at the same time, for the Iranian people, there are serious economic hardships that are going on there, and that's a more worrying thing for the regime in Iran.
Zainab, yesterday we heard about 13 potential retaliations. Are any of those still possible, or does it all depend on the US reaction?
The way I read it, it was 13 possible scenarios, and it didn't mean that they will carry all of them, or, so I assume that from the statements that came out, that this is now the scenario they decided to go with, the conventional attacking an airbase, and they want to kind of, they're trying to avoid to unite the world against them if they conducted other less conventional attacks.
All right, thanks very much indeed, Zainab. Zainab Fateh, they're live on the line from Dubai, and of course oil is very much at the core of this. And straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we'll have an exclusive interview with OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo, who'll be talking about what the impact may be on the oil price. Certainly, as we talk, oil has been on a rise, and at the moment, what's it reading at the moment?
69.07, up more than 1%. That's coming off the highs. We were approaching $70 a barrel earlier, and really what's been interesting is if you look at some of the options, call options have been rising, but also what some of the options markets have been signaling is a short-term spike, but not necessarily the price staying elevated. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks will try to right themselves following a lower session yesterday. Geopolitical concerns continue to weigh on the market. Emily Rowland at JH Investments says prices remain near their all-time highs, and she doesn't see them turning sharply lower.
There's so much cash that's sitting on the sidelines waiting for this opportunity to invest, waiting for this potential dip, and we think that cash is just an inefficient place to be right now.
The first of this week's job-related reports may help take investors' minds off the Middle East. ADP will have its December update on private sector employment in December. Former Nissan chief Carlos Ghosn holds a news conference today in Beirut. He escaped just over a week ago from Japan, where he was awaiting trial for financial misconduct. Walgreens reports earnings today for its most recent quarter. Investors are looking for clarity on the drugstore chain's long-term vision, according to analysts at Cowen and Baird. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Why do so many Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies count on GEP? Because GEP helps them optimize their procurement and supply chain operations, helping reduce expenses, boost EBITDA, and increase competitiveness. The results are nothing short of amazing. Strategy, software, managed services. GEP brings it all together. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
At Argos, our sale is still on and so much more, with new products added. Go online to shop our full range of amazing deals, including home, tech and toys. Get same-day home delivery 7 days a week. With Argos, you're good to go. Subject to availability, selected lines, delivery conditions apply, order by 6 p.m, 90% UK coverage.
The Honda Jazz, the car that feels fabulously small on the outside, yet deceptively big on the inside, with its incredible storage solutions and magic folding seats. Not to mention the suite of advanced safety features. And now with the small but big Jazz event, it's available with 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing until January 31st. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are credit brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life 5K, joined by Jackie Clark. Jackie, what would first place today mean to you?
I think you've got the wrong race, love. This is Race for Life. This is about beating cancer, not getting a gold medal.
And how did you train for this event?
I just turned up. It's a walk in the park, literally. Why aren't you doing it? Trainers on, let's go.
We're not athletes, we're cancer beaters. Sign up to Race for Life now and get 30% off entry until the 31st of January in partnership with Tesco.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league. Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
Live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London. 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahid.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, we stay in the red with European equities 30 minutes into the market open here, down 0.5% on the Stock 600. Every industry group except oil and gas in the red. Seeing a lot of red on the screen across regional equity benchmarks as well. The FTSE 100 down 0.6%. CAC 40 lower by 0.5%. Same as the IBEX and FTSE MIB, and the DAX leading losses down 0.7%. US futures steadying up a little, but still in negative territory. Earlier we saw S&P 500 E-minis drop as much as 1.7%. They're down 0.2% now. NASDAQ and Dow futures down about 0.3%. What caused the risk off, of course, was retaliation from Iran in terms of missile strikes on US Iraqi bases, but they've said they're not seeking escalation, not seeking war, and that perhaps has moderated the risk of sentiment somewhat. But it's still there. Of course, it was reflected in the oil price, with Brent heading towards $72 a barrel in the Asian session. We've come off the high 69.07, up 1.2% on Brent crude. WTI at 63.26, up 0.9%, and gold spiked above $1,600 an ounce for the first time since 2013. We're still higher by 0.7%, $1,586 an ounce. In terms of the haven bids, so the 10-year Treasury yield dropped 11 basis points towards 170 at one point. We're now down 2 basis points, just below a 180 handle. But with that drop earlier, we broke a trend that we've been in since September. We're steady in European bond markets. And just taking a check on the yen, this is the haven that hasn't really moved so much in reaction to this news. Dollar yen steady at 108.44, Roger.
Well, let's have a look at some of today's top stories. And as we said, Iran struck back at the United States early Wednesday for killing its top general, firing a series of missiles at 2 military bases in Iraq housing American troops in an escalation of the crisis. More from Bloomberg's Mark Mills.
Iranian state TV said it was in revenge for the U.S. killing of Revolutionary Guard General Qasem Soleimani, whose death last week in an American drone strike near Baghdad prompted angry calls to avenge his slaying. A U.S. official said there were no immediate reports of American casualties. The strikes, which came as Iran buried Soleimani, raised fears that the two longtime foes were closer to war, but there were some indications the tensions could ease, at least in the short term. All is well, President Trump tweeted shortly after the missile attacks, adding, "So far, so good," regarding casualties. Moments earlier, Iran's foreign minister tweeted that Tehran had taken and concluded proportionate measures in self-defense, adding that Tehran did not seek escalation, but would defend itself against further aggression. Mark Mills, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And what's crucial now, of course, Roger, is the U.S. response, as we expect to hear from President Trump later. Now, also in Iran, a Boeing 737 bound from Iran to Ukraine crashed shortly after takeoff today. Reports say all 176 people on board were killed. The Ukraine international plane was a version of the 737 that had not been grounded. Iran says it appears the crash was caused by technical issues. But we've since also heard from Ukraine on this.
Well, Ukraine, the Ukraine Airlines themselves, as I said, they're still looking into this. They're saying it wasn't the crew's fault. That's the one line they've come up with at the moment. Now, in top corporate news, memory chip prices have started to climb out of their persistent slump. That's good news for the world's largest maker of the chips, South Korea's Samsung Electronics. Samsung's quarterly sales fell short, but profit was better than expecting.
And the CEO of Daimler promises that cost cuts today will pay for the cars of tomorrow. The parent of Mercedes-Benz unveiled the latest concept car at CES in Las Vegas. CEO Ola Källenius told reporters he's looking to trim costs to free up cash. That money will be used on future technologies such as electric cars and self-driving software.
Now, let's go back to the rising tension in the Middle East. Oil prices jumped after Iran attacked the two U.S. Iraqi bases in their first response to the killing of one of its top generals, sparking fears that the deepening conflict would disrupt global crude supplies. But OPEC and one of its biggest producers have sought to tamp down concerns on that. OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo spoke to Bloomberg's Manus Cranny earlier this morning.
We remain confident that the leaders, our leaders in particular in this region, currently doing everything possible to restore normalcy, to arrest the situation before it spirals out of control. And I just want to use the opportunity you are giving me by asking this question to respectfully urge all world leaders across the regions to rally round and support the noble efforts of the leaders in this region who have embarked on these initiatives to restore normalcy. We in OPEC, in the last 60 years, we have faced several challenges, including wars, invasions, 6 oil cycles, and each time we tried to insulate ourselves from the geopolitics and depoliticize this beautiful resource, oil. And I believe we're going to continue to do this in order to remain reliable, dependable suppliers to consuming nations such as Bangladesh, India, China, many other emerging markets, and to ensure that this beautiful resource remains competitive in the energy transition.
Can I ask you, if I look at the market, Sean and I were chatting about this before we started, which is to contextualize the past 6 months. It is not an incident of splendid isolation, as Disraeli once said, that has happened overnight. It is an amalgam of 6 months of angst in the market. Are you surprised that the market has been, I suppose, relatively calm in the face of such geopolitical angst?
I believe in the last 3 years, the market and the financial markets in particular have come to acknowledge and accept the declaration of cooperation of 24 producing countries, the first time in history, to come together to take decisions jointly, to implement them jointly in order to ensure sustainable stability in the oil market. We have seen in September the unfortunate events in Kuwait and Al-Baik in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where 5% or so of world supply was shut out.
And is that what we need to remember, that OPEC Plus, can I use the phrase, stands ready to do whatever it takes if there is an outage? Is that the consensus that the market needs to understand from you this morning?
It is not about outage, it's not about slogans, it's about facing reality. It's about facing the situation of uncertainty. And in this world of today, where the only thing that is certain is this uncertainty, the world should commend these 24 countries, diverse as they are, coming together to work together to ensure the stability, to ensure the security of supply to consuming nations.
And that was the OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo speaking to Bloomberg's Manus Cranny.
For the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Naira, good morning. Let's start with one of our top stories. The next act of the Carlos Ghosn drama begins today. The former Nissan chief is holding a news conference in Beirut to tell his side of the story. He's accusing his former employer of making him a scapegoat to block further integration with Renault. Ghosn escaped Japan in late December, fleeing to Lebanon. Crossing over to Europe, the UK wants a free trade deal with the EU by the end of the year. That's what Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to tell European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen today. But late last year, the EU chief expressed scepticism it was possible to reach a deal on such a tight schedule. Now to Spain. Socialist leader Pedro Sanchez has won the slimmest of victories in Parliament on Tuesday to take power for a second term. Bloomberg's Charlie Devereux has that story.
The slim victory, facilitated by abstentions from the pro-independence ERC party in Catalonia, underscores the difficulty he'll face to pass the litany of legislation his coalition has promised voters. Sanchez plans higher taxes on large companies and wealthier Spaniards in order to raise the minimum wage. In Madrid, this is Charlie Devereux for Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Indonesian President Joko Widodo is visiting Natuna Islands today. That's amid renewed tensions with China over the lucrative fishing waters that lie between Malaysia and Borneo. Bloomberg's Philip Hymans has all those details.
Jokowi, as Widodo is popularly known, will meet hundreds of fishermen in the area following the sighting of Chinese fishing vessels and Coast Guard ships near the Natuna Islands in recent weeks, according to a statement on the Cabinet Secretariat website. Indonesia has sent warships and 120 fishing vessels to patrol the area, Indonesian authorities said. While Indonesia claims the incursion of fishing vessels were a violation of international law, China said it's operating legally. In Singapore, Philip Hymans, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Peter Dixon, global equities economist at Commerzbank, will join us in the studio. We're seeing equities trading in the red in Europe, 40 minutes into the open, but it's a fairly muted move on the Stock 600. We're down just under 0.5% to the downside. Investors assessing the geopolitical risk in the Middle East as we wait for a response from the US. This is Bloomberg.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO, active fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment decision.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard? Or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip. Run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run.
Mix it.
Do you go on the same holiday every year? To the same country, in the same hotel, with the same sea view, visit the same ancient monuments, lay by the same dolphin-shaped pool, meet the same Barrys and Sandras, and wear the same Hawaiian shirt that you'd never wear at home? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. With its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
On the goal line, scores and takes it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores.
The action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Puts his head down, crashes, and
the snap is good. The hold is good. The kick is on its way. It is good!
Did you know all weekend long the NFL playoffs are on TuneIn?
In for the touchdown.
Search NFL to never miss a moment of the action.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
The Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And it's very much been a tale of a great deal of risk-off sentiment, particularly in Asia, in the aftermath of those attacks on 2 U.S. facilities in Iraq. And then a little bit of easing back after the sense that perhaps the two sides were not going up towards a full-scale war, and in fact were trying to de-escalate the situation to some extent. A lot of details still to come out about that, but in the European markets, we're still seeing a risk-off sentiment. Stock 600 down 0.5%, FTSE 100 down 0.4%, the CAC down 0.6%, the DAX down 0.8%, and looking to the US opening, S&P E-mini futures down 0.2%, the Dow down 0.4%, and the Nasdaq down 0.3%. So perhaps a sense of people waiting still to find out what the real outcome of all this will be. Oil, of course, has responded to this. WTI 63.08, that's up 0.6%. Brent crude up 0.8% at $68.82 the barrel. The US 10-year Treasuries did see a bit of a plummet in points earlier, but now 1.79 is the handle. And the yen, which you normally would be, I think, perhaps a strong haven currency in most cases, doesn't actually seem to have moved that much. Currently 108.42. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Roger, good morning. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to arrive in Istanbul on a visit officially dedicated to the inauguration of the Turk Stream gas pipeline between Russia and Turkey. Turkish President Erdogan and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin will most likely focus on geopolitical tensions. The fallout from the US-Iran conflict is likely to top the agenda. Crossing over to the US, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he has the votes and he doesn't need the Democrats' cooperation to set the terms of President Trump's impeachment trial. That would let McConnell reject their calls for an agreement on new witness testimony. And finally, creatures dreamt up by J.K. Rowling are going on display at the Natural History Museum. The exhibition, which opens in spring, will take inspiration from the author's Fantastic Beasts series. It'll showcase creatures from the natural, mythical and wizarding world and examine how legends have been inspired by the real world. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Leanne. Now, we've got with us Peter Dixon, Global Equities Economist at Commerzbank, joining us now in the London studio for the rest of the programme. Peter, very good morning to you. Thanks for being with us. Well, let's kick off on what's been happening overnight, because there clearly are impacts, as yet perhaps not entirely clear what those impacts will be from the Iranian action and the potential US response. Obviously, we're seeing moves in gold and oil. Do you sense that this is one of the headwinds that could really cause major problems for the global economy going into 2020?
For the economy, potentially, if things really heat up. I think for the moment, however, I regard it as a fairly localized action. However, the potential consequences for markets are much more severe. We've seen over the course of this year so far that European markets are, give or take, broadly flat. US markets surprisingly up. But I mean, given the huge gains that we saw last year, given the extent to which the economy is likely to slow down a little bit, equity sentiments to me has always seemed a little bit overdone. I know I've said that for many months, and markets still continue to defy gravity, but it probably won't take much, to puncture that sentiment. And this could potentially, be that event. But obviously, as you said before, we're all waiting and seeing.
Yeah. I mean, when we think about sort of the implications of this, like obviously we can see how the ramifications could hit the oil price. We know that gold's been strongly bid. Would you be tempted to really put some protection on at the same time as drawing down equity risk? Like, how risk off would you want to be going into 2020, Peter?
For me, I'm very risk off, but again, that's probably the economist in me speaking. But as I said to Roger just before, I mean, I think it's because we've had such a strong rally. It feels to me that this is
not if you take the fourth quarter of 2018 into account.
Well, no, of course not. But I mean, we're still, it's the point at which we have had a very strong rally over the course of the past 12 months, and I think that's what investors are looking at. And I rather suspect that they're probably going to step out for a little while anyway. And I think the concern also is, where's the economy going? It's not going very far, very fast. I mean, obviously the European economy is struggling to get into any sort of gear. The US economy is likely to slow a little bit in the course of this year. So, all told, there are headwinds, and I don't think it's time to be going long. At best, I'm neutral, and I think, to be honest, I'm underweight equities right now.
Well, let me make the counter case, which is that we're in a position where we have a US election year, where clearly Donald Trump wants to have an economy that's very stable. The Fed doesn't seem to be in any mood to make major changes. We've got almost certainly a signing of the American-Chinese Phase 1 trade deal coming up. Even in Europe, we've got Brexit apparently moving into a more stable phase. I mean, there are reasons to be optimistic, surely.
Well, reasons to be less pessimistic. Let me put it that way. I think that's the counter case. I think that's all true. I mean, some of the obstacles to sentiment that we've seen over the course of the past year or two, may be less of an issue in 2020. But my concern is simply the length of the economic cycle. We're well into the longest economic cycle in US economic history. So even if we muddle through this year, and I think we will, I don't think this is going to be terrible. At some point over the next year or two, we're setting ourselves, I think, for a bigger fall. So you might want to squeeze a little bit more juice out of the lemon in the course of 2020. Not now, maybe in a couple of weeks' time when things are a little bit more clear. But I'm still dancing near the door, as they say.
Peter, are we in a super cycle though, where actually what we might have is a little bit of a slowdown, maybe even a very mild recession in growth? Central banks step back in, and back we are again to last year. I mean, this has happened a few times in this, as some people are calling it, super cycle.
Well, it has, but I think as Mark Carney pointed out, and a number of other central bankers have also suggested over the course of recent months, the extent to which central bankers can come in and boost the economy is becoming increasingly limited. Policy, in their words, isn't maxed out. I mean, I think it's pretty close to that level, to be honest. But it's very difficult to see exactly how we can keep this expansion going without additional support from governments in the form of fiscal policy. If we get that, then maybe we're talking
What's better than being at one with nature? How about being at two with nature? Get a 2-for-1 companion voucher valid for 2 years when you spend £10,000 each year on the British Airways American Express Premium Plus card. Probably best not to go for the silent retreat then. Search BA Amex to find out more. Representative 76% APR variable. Annual fee applies. Applicants must be 18 years or older. Subject to approval. Terms, taxes, fees and carrier charges apply.
So many moving parts right now.
So many moving parts, so let's recap some of this. So according to the Pentagon, the attack occurred around 5:30 p.m. Eastern time yesterday, with Iran launching more than a dozen ballistic missiles. So their target, 2 coalition air bases in Iraq, where U.S. troops are stationed, as we just heard from Dom. One, the Al Asad Air Base, one of the largest in the world, it's less than 200 miles from Baghdad. The other in northern Iraq, less than 100 miles from the Iranian-Iraqi border. So Iran almost immediately claiming responsibility for these attacks, the country's foreign minister tweeting in part that Iran, quote, took proportionate measures in self-defense, adding, "We do not seek escalation or war, but will defend ourselves against any aggression." U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Defense Secretary Mark Esper, and other top national security officials gathering at the White House in the hours after the attack. And following that meeting, the president tweeting that, quote, "All is well," adding, "We have the most powerful and well-equipped military anywhere in the world by far. I will be making a statement tomorrow morning." So in a separate development, we also want to bring you up to speed on the crash of that Ukrainian Boeing 737-800 that went down just moments after takeoff just outside of Tehran. The crash came just hours after Iran launched its missile attack on those Iraqi bases. Iranian officials say that they suspect the crash was caused by mechanical issues. 176 people were on board. Authorities believe there are no survivors. The Ukrainian president says that he has instructed his prosecutor general to open criminal proceedings over that crash. Boeing says it's also conducting its own investigation. Shares of Boeing are down on the news. Last I checked in pre-market, about 2.5% there. So not what Boeing needs to hear. Of course, a tragic crash, 176 people. It doesn't believe, they don't think that there are any survivors. So a lot more to figure out there.
All right, and it's worth pointing out right now that the Boeing share reaction is causing much of the loss that we're seeing in Dow futures right now. Exactly. Rahel Solomon, thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, stock futures initially sank on the news of those missile strikes, the Dow pointing to a more than 400-point loss at the open today, but futures have paired those losses, and I mean dramatically. Futures are now down by about 46 points. The whipsaw action also evident in crude oil prices, U.S. benchmark and world benchmark prices spiking before leveling off in early trading this morning. WTI American-based crude currently up on the day, but only by 6 cents. That's 0.1%, $62.77 the last trade there for WTI crude. Taking a look at the Asian market's reaction to these latest developments, you take a look, first of all, at the Nikkei in Japan off 1.5%, the Hang Seng off almost 1%, the Shanghai Composite off over 1%, and the Kospi in South Korea down by 1% as well. On the European trade, we're also seeing that negativity carry there, although we are again off the worst level of the session in Europe. The German DAX is down by 1/3 of 1%. The CAC in France off by about 1/4 of 1%. The FTSE 100 in the UK down by about 0.2 of 1% as well. Now, it's also worth pointing out in just the last 5-10 minutes or so, S&P 500 futures here in the United States actually turned positive. So the S&P right now looking to open just about flat after all the turmoil that we saw in futures markets overnight, given those Iran missile strikes. We have global team coverage on this fluid situation overall. CNBC contributor Michelle Caruso-Cabrera is live in Beirut, Lebanon. Phil LeBeau is in Chicago tracking the latest on that Boeing jet crash as well. NBC's Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv, Israel. We are also joined by Elliot Hentoff in London. He's the head of policy and research at State Street Global Advisors and a non-resident scholar at the Middle East Institute as well. Let's start with Matt Bradley reporting from Tel Aviv.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary moment. I mean, think about it this way. The Iranians have just attacked American military targets with conventional Iranian forces directly in a foreign country, Iraq. And so far, it seems as though there's been no casualties on either side. The Iranians have called this attack a success. Donald Trump has said all is well. If all of the facts stand as we know them right now, this could be it. This could be the end. But here in Israel, everybody is girding for more. They are waiting for the other foot to drop because so far the response by the Iranians doesn't seem to match the kind of rhetoric and angry words that we've been hearing from throughout the region after the death of Qasem Soleimani 5 days ago. So what we would be expecting if something else were to happen is probably a non-conventional attack. Remember, this was a conventional attack by marked Iranian forces against what they considered to be American targets. But the Iranians have, over the past generations, laid a very intricate network of proxy groups, of political parties, and allied governments throughout the region who have long been poised and ready to react to any time that the Iranians say that they need people to move to the front line. The most capable of all of those forces is Hezbollah, north of where I'm standing in Lebanon. They could easily strike against Israel. The problem is that while Israel is surrounded by hostile enemies, Israel is in a very good position to retaliate should they be attacked. And that's what we heard from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just this morning.
All right, Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv, Israel. Thank you very much. Let's now turn to CNBC's own Phil LeBeau. And Phil, Boeing stock is down morning in the wake of that deadly jet crash, down 2.5% pre-market. It's apparently separate from the missile attack from Iran against U.S. interests in Iraq. But Phil, almost the entire Dow implied open to the downside is due just to Boeing alone.
Right, and that's because there are more questions than answers at this point as to why a Boeing 737-800, which we believe was 3 or 4 years old, we're still trying to confirm that at this point, owned by Ukrainian Airlines, it crashed within minutes of taking off in Tehran. 176 people on board, all are believed to be dead in that crash. The incident is interesting from this perspective. You have a plane that crashes right after takeoff. Highly unusual that happens. Also, you want to check out the engines on that aircraft. There are reports that there may have been an engine fire, completely unconfirmed at this point. There is no indication that this